Bienvenidos a un programa más de la serie. Hoy en Adelante, Job Course, un programa educacional gratuito para jóvenes entre 16 y 24 años de edad. También ponga atención porque el abogado Joseph Rivas habla de los últimos memorandums del presidente Obama que otorgan un camino a la ciudadanía para familias y miembros de la Armada, entre otros casos. Y la abogada Azadeh Shahshahani de la ACLU de Georgia habla sobre un estudio que denuncia el perfil racial condenado por leyes internacionales. Job Course es un programa de entrenamiento educacional y residencial gratuito que ayuda a estudiantes de entre 16 y 24 años de edad a prepararse con la experiencia que necesitan para obtener un mejor trabajo y mejorar su calidad de vida. En el siguiente reportaje, Omar Barberena, consejero de admisión para esta organización, nos explica cuáles son los beneficios y los requisitos para ser parte de este programa.
Welcome to Job Corps. I'm going to be giving you an orientation to have a better idea what we are, what we do, what we offer, and what we are actually expecting for each of one of you.
Well, la misión del programa de Job Corps es el programa educativo de la nación más grande. Es un programa federal que tenemos hasta 122 centros de aprendizaje donde los estudiantes de 16 a 24 años reciben educación técnica o vocacional gratuitamente. Nosotros tenemos centros por toda la nación. En realidad tenemos como 122 centros. Y en realidad cada año nosotros entrenamos a más de 60,000 estudiantes. Tenemos variedades de carreras. Tenemos carreras de automotriz y también tenemos carreras de construcción. Tenemos carreras de servicios de finanzas y contabilidad. También tenemos carreras de salud y tenemos también carreras culinarias, ¿no? Además de eso, también les ayudamos a los estudiantes si acaso no han completado su escuela primaria y secundaria o su GED, la equivalencia del diploma de la secundaria. Les podemos ayudar con eso también. No solamente les damos entrenamientos de destrezas para su carrera, pero también les damos, como les decimos en inglés, hands-on, trabajos con la mano. Porque, por ejemplo, tenemos allá compañías que llegan a dar entrenamiento a estudiantes para trabajar con las máquinas. Y también les damos uniformes para que ellos se sientan que en realidad cuando están aprendiendo también tienen la idea de que están trabajando en la carrera que se están adestrando. Primero que todo, cuando llegan los estudiantes, las primeras semanas o la primera semana tienen ellos orientaciones allá, porque tienen que hacer las reglas, saber cuándo se acuestan, saber cuándo se levantan. Entonces, una vez que están allá también, al comienzo tenemos nosotros consejeros de carreras y ellos se van a reunir con los consejeros para comenzar a mirar qué destreza tiene un estudiante, porque al estudiante también durante las primeras semanas se le da un examen de admisión para ver a qué nivel están ellos. Y depende de ese nivel, entonces el consejero de carrera le va a comenzar a decir cuáles son las clases que van a tomar. Además, los estudiantes también tienen la opción de estar con nosotros hasta 2 años, porque cada estudiante va a su propio paso, ¿no? Con su propia destreza. Y además de eso, una vez que ellos se gradúan, nosotros tenemos servicios que tenemos especialistas que les ayudan a conseguir trabajo. Tenemos también programas que les decimos avanzados, que son para estudiantes que quieren ir a estudiar en un colegio o una universidad de 4 años. Tenemos programas que pueden agarrar créditos en clases que nosotros ofrecemos que son válidas en las universidades. Es una vida como ir a un colegio de entrenamiento técnico. Ellos tienen dormitorios, hay dormitorios para mujeres y también dormitorios para hombres y están separados completamente, ¿no? Pero ellos están en un ambiente colegial, en un ambiente como que si van a una universidad. El propósito de tomar a los estudiantes y que vayan a estudiar fuera de su ciudad más que todo es para que salgan del ambiente en que ellos están en el momento y adestrarlos para que se enfoquen en su educación. Las personas que son menores de 18 años de edad tienen que tener permiso de los padres y les damos documentos donde los padres tienen que firmar para que nos den permiso de que ellos puedan estar en los campos. Además de eso, por ley, porque son menores de edad, tienen que estar aquí en el estado de Wisconsin, y las personas que tienen de 16 a 17 años normalmente van a ir al centro de Blackwell. Bueno, el centro está más o menos como 4 horas de aquí, en realidad está como a 1 hora al norte de Green Bay, es un poco alejado de la ciudad, ¿no? Pero es un centro donde hay bastante adiestramientos y buena educación y aloja más o menos como a 205 estudiantes. Que tenemos requisitos. Primero que todo, tienen que ser estudiantes o participantes de 16 a 24 años de edad. Segundo, porque es un programa federal, tienen que ser ciudadanos o tener papeles de estatus de residencia de los Estados Unidos. Primero que todo tienen que pasar un proceso de orientación. Vienen aquí los estudiantes, ellos tienen su aplicación. Después de eso hacemos una entrevista personal y en realidad le decimos una entrevista profesional porque queremos que los estudiantes vengan a Job Corps con la idea de que van a ser profesionales. Chequeamos todos los requisitos, chequeamos también récords, por ejemplo, si tienen multas más de $250, ellos no pueden entrar. Si tienen probación, ellos no pueden entrar. Si tienen una felonía, ellos no pueden entrar. Entonces estamos asegurándonos de que estos estudiantes estén listos para participar en el programa, porque tampoco agarramos a personas que hacen drogas o que tienen problemas con el alcohol. En estos momentos no estamos teniendo el suficiente apogeo de las personas latinas, ¿no? Muchas veces ellos no saben que hay este tipo de programas y por eso quiero que ellos sepan más de los programas que ofrecemos. Y para mí es importante porque yo, siendo latino, pues me puedo comunicar con ellos de una forma mejor y además también con los padres. Ellos pueden visitar el website que es el general de nosotros, que es www.jobcorps.gov, o ellos también pueden llamar a mi teléfono. Bueno, primero que todo, ellos tienen que venir a una orientación, que tenemos orientación aquí en este edificio, 611 oeste de la Nacional, a las 1:30 todos los lunes, y también tenemos orientación todos los martes a la misma hora también. Primero que todo, una mejor vida porque el conocimiento que va a sacar, ya sea por 1 año o hasta los 2 años, es una carrera técnica que ellos pueden conseguir con más facilidad un trabajo, con buen pago y además tener una vida independiente y una vida más productiva.
One of the things that you gotta ask yourself, Job Corps is here for you. Are you ready for Job Corps?
Un memorándum del presidente Obama está otorgando beneficios a un grupo de personas bajo deportación cuyos familiares habían ingresado una petición para ellos. El abogado en inmigración, Joseph Rivas, nos habla sobre este asunto. Attorney Rivas, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good evening.
There is this presidential order that is helping some people who are under deportation, but their relatives petitioned them before.
People who are in deportation proceedings, many of them are often eligible to acquire lawful resident status. The procedure is called an adjustment of status application. If a person is apprehended by the Immigration Service, ICE, then their court goes before an immigration judge. And oftentimes, these cases are what I would believe are very simple, straightforward cases. They've already had a petition approved for their immigration, but their case happens to be in front of an immigration judge. Right now, we have over 240,000 cases pending with the immigration judges. There's 57 judges in courts throughout the United States. For example, here in our part of the country, 5 states, Iowa, Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, and Wisconsin, have their immigration cases held in Chicago. And so you can understand that those judges in Chicago, and there's only 5 judges in Chicago, their backlog is quite extensive. Sometimes you may have to wait a year or year and a half for your hearing. And especially since the case is quite straightforward, this new initiative by President Obama and Homeland Security is to take out these simple cases, take them out of the long line, out of the immigration court, and revert those cases back to the local offices. So that would benefit somebody in northern Wisconsin who has to drive to Chicago for a case that's going to be 18 months, 2 years down the line. They can have their cases adjudicated by the Milwaukee immigration office, so they won't have to travel that far. Those cases still have to be judged on the merits by the immigration office. But what it does, it relieves the immigration court system, and I believe I have heard 17,000 cases are going to be taken away from the immigration court and reverted back to the local immigration offices. These folks still have to qualify for their benefits, but then that really helps the immigration court to work on cases where they really need to remove people who have no right to remain in the United States, and many of them are convicted felons, drug dealers, murderers, what have you. At least we can then move those cases on forward. So that's what this initiative is all about, although there is much misunderstanding about this initiative.
Yes, there are very few good news right now for immigrants for status adjustment. So this is in the middle of nothing, something that comes out and brings this terrible fight in between Democrats and Republicans, when the Republicans are blaming the president on saying that he's granting amnesty because he's taking these memos and this small group of people are getting little benefit. Well,
they're not really gaining any substantive benefit. They're not getting any right they wouldn't have gotten anyways. It's really more like a procedural change. And the procedural change is to take it out of the immigration court, move it to the local CIS offices. They do the fingerprints and the background checks and the interviews rather than having an immigration judge deal with that. So no new substantive legal right is going to be passed on to these people. It's just more or less a procedure matter, and where the people can do it in their local office, and the local office can then handle these cases. So those people who are saying that the president is coming out with another benefit and granting some kind of amnesty are obviously misunderstood on this issue.
What would you tell to these people who have their relatives right now going under the process of deportation, but they had already have a kind of petition from a relative?
Well, as I understand this memo, there's always an attorney that represents the government for their deportation cases. And the order has been passed on that these attorneys are supposed to investigate these cases to determine which ones can be resolved by sending it back to the local immigration office. An attorney who believes that their client is eligible for this, they can contact the trial attorney and say, I have a client who can benefit by this. Why don't you pull this case out, look at it, and then join with me to have the case dismissed, because it is technically a motion to dismiss the case in front of the judge, and the trial attorney has to go along with it. Of course, the final decision rests with the immigration judge, but I can tell you this, if an immigration judge can remove one case in front of him or her, they're most likely entitled to doing that. Okay,
many times people are not aware that they are candidates, that they have the option, to have a path of legalizing their status. How can we call those in the audience, who can be in that situation? Sometimes people get really scared when they are stopped, they are in the process of deportation. Many times they are arrested, sent to jail. They are, there for months. And many times they don't even try to do something about it when they have options in cases like this.
Well,
what would you tell to those families?
I'll be the first
that
one to
people?
tell you, I've been doing immigration law for more than 25 years, and this law is complex. I would say half of the cases that are referred to me are from other attorneys. They get onto this case and they say, oh, this is an immigration case, this is too complex. I'm going to refer this to someone who specializes this kind of practice. I think people in this kind of a case should consult with a qualified immigration lawyer or talk to a lawyer, and then their lawyer can refer them on to an immigration specialist. Unfortunately, I find many cases that come to me where the folks go to a notario or they go to somebody who pretends to be a lawyer, and then something is done in the case where I cannot fix it anymore by the time it gets to me. And I always say it's easier to prevent a problem than trying to solve one. So talk to somebody, engage the services of an attorney to find out what your cases are all about. Many times I get people who come to me and I say, what has happened in the past, we cannot fix. And that's regrettable because you could have done something in the past. And so always consult with somebody that knows the immigration law.
So they should look for an attorney who specializes on immigration law.
Not that I'm giving a commercial for the American Immigration Lawyers Association, but if you're a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, you do have to apply for that membership. And immigration law isn't something that an attorney can dabble in. You have to work at it all the time because the laws keep changing all the time. And it is excellent advice to talk to somebody who knows about this complex area of the law.
Attorney Rivas, where can people find you? Do you have a phone number, a website where people can reach you?
Our law firm, we do have a website. It's www.hmrvisa.com, and our office telephone number is 414-962-7440. And we do have a receptionist that is bilingual, and she speaks Spanish, and she takes much of the information from the calls that come in. But we are now seeing many inquiries coming in through the internet. We're getting emails, and so we're just getting contacts, and we're responding either email or by telephone.
We are grateful because you are here today with us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. La abogada Azadeh Shahshahani de la Unión Americana de Derechos Civiles ACLU de Georgia visitó Milwaukee en abril pasado. Ella nos habla de un estudio realizado sobre perfil racial, una práctica que es denunciada por las leyes internacionales de derechos humanos. Attorney Shahshahani, thank you very much for joining us on Adelante.
Thank you very much for having me.
You also conducted a second study focused on racial profiling. What were the main issues that you found in this other research?
Right, so our study was focused on Gwinnett County, Georgia, which has large numbers of immigrants, not only from Latino descent, but also South Asian and African refugees and immigrants. And Gwinnett is the county in Georgia which received 287G most recently, back in November. And what we found was that racial profiling was already a problem in Gwinnett County, and it has unfortunately continued in the course of the past 4 months because there's little oversight. There's little accountability for the police in Gwinnett or anywhere else in Georgia. Again, it has also led to fear among community members where they are reluctant to contact the police because of the fear of being placed in deportation proceedings.
One of the things that have been observed with immigrants is that they feel that they have no rights. And in your studies, some of the laws that are violated by these police actions are mentioned. What are the national and international laws that are affected when these kind of actions are taken against the civil rights of immigrants?
So when it comes to racial profiling specifically, there's got to be reasonable suspicion or probable cause, which means that there's got to be a good reason before a person is pulled over. And a lot of times, we saw and we heard from community members that no reason was provided to them. So through the study, it showed that equal protection of the laws was not afforded to immigrant community members, as well as due process of law wasn't afforded to them. And also the United States is party to a number of international treaties, including the Convention on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. The U.S. has actually ratified this treaty, as well as the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, both of which prohibit discrimination based on race or background.
There are constant complaints about violations in all the areas regarding the life of immigrants in the communities. And one of them is that talking to one of the directors of one of the most important organizations in Wisconsin that advocates for immigrant workers' rights, she mentioned that even if programs like 287G have not been implemented in Wisconsin, the violations of civil rights are taken on the streets and on jail constantly. Police is communicating with immigration office, and they are not following the law steps or the steps under the law when they arrest these immigrants. What will be your comments about it?
Well, we would recommend that all police agencies and all states pass the anti-racial profiling legislation, which basically would provide for a collection of data related to a person's background, race, religion upon traffic or pedestrian stops, and then have this data available to the public. And so, having this data available, like some states now, about 14 states have stop and search data legislation on the books, including North Carolina, Texas, and Utah. Having this data available provides for a measure of accountability and transparency, so we can see, who is being stopped and what was the reason provided that led to these stops, as well as annual training for law enforcement and discipline for law enforcement officers who actually engage in racial profiling or other abuse.
Attorney Shahshahani, but it's something that is really working, because we hear these complaints across the country. Are any actions that Latino communities or Muslim or Middle Eastern communities are taking that are stopping or at least lessening these kind of actions that are affecting so many families?
Mm-hmm. Well, for one thing, community members should file complaints with the Civil Rights and Civil Liberties Division of Immigration and Customs Enforcement. They should also file complaints with the Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice. For example, the DOJ has initiated an investigation around actions taken by Sheriff Arpaio in Arizona, and as you mentioned, there is abuse happening all across the country, and so we as community members should bring the abuse to the attention of the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division.
So there are some reactions already against those who are going against the law, and people should be encouraged and know and have this information as an important information for them to continue calling and alerting the rest of the community on what is happening.
Yes, and community members should initiate and continue conversations with local decision makers. So it is a good thing that Wisconsin doesn't have a 287G agreement on the books, and community members should continue talking to the various county commissioners, the city councils, the police chiefs, the sheriffs, to alert them about the abuses that are happening, and to come up with mechanisms to hold accountable those who have engaged in abuses.
And for those immigrants who feel that they have no rights and who constantly hear these politicians of these other people against immigrants who think that it doesn't matter what needs to be done in order to take the immigrants out of the country, what can be the criteria for the immigrants against this position? Mm-hmm. What can they do? How they provide the power themselves to continue fighting in this fight that seems to be lost?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, communities shouldn't lose hope. They should organize forums. It's very important for the stories to be documented. Because, we all know that abuse is happening, but unless and until the stories are documented, in the form of a report or otherwise, and for this evidence to be collected and, turned over to the DOJ, turned over to ICE, turned over to local decision makers, that's very important step. And also community members need to make sure that they are aware of their rights, because unless and until we are aware of what our rights are, we're not going to be able to assert them.
Is there a place where people can go and read the studies that can be conducted by you and the ACLU in Georgia?
Yes, people can go to our website. It's www.acluga.org. And I would also encourage people to visit the website of the ACLU National, www.aclu.org.
Are these places conducting the audience to go to the studies? Are the studies included in these websites?
It's on the homepage of our website, the ACLU of Georgia website.
Attorney Shahshahani, thank you very much for
Thank
being with
you.
us and for this very important information for our audience.
Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Al final de un programa más, por favor déjenos saber sus comentarios al teléfono 297-7544 o escríbanos a nuestro correo electrónico adelante@matc.edu. Visítenos en nuestro sitio del internet en mptv.org y en Facebook. Sintonícenos en canal 10.1 o 36.2 todos los martes a las 6:30 de la tarde. Y en canal 36.1 los miércoles a las 12:30 de la medianoche y los domingos a las 5:30 de la tarde. Soy Patricia Gomez, muy buenas noches.